without limits or judgment. A place for you and people like you to tell your most effed up stories.
Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Effed Up Stories. I'm your host, Will Pender.
And I am your co-host, Ryan Sharp.
And tonight, it's going to be a little bit different. We don't have a guest tonight, but we're going to be talking about an interesting topic anyway. Of course, many of you may have stumbled upon this or even visited the place because it's now a tourist attraction. But we will be discussing the Winchester House. Now, there are two sides to this story, so I just wanted to point out that we'll be focusing on one half. But before we get into the actual story, I kind of just wanted to say a couple things. First of all, since our last podcast, we've crossed the threshold of over 100,000 views, so again, a big thanks to all of our fans out there. And, of course, we've gotten quite a few new stories and stuff like that submitted to our site. So you should definitely check those out at our official site, which is effedupstories.com. That's effedupstories.com. And for those of you who aren't familiar with it, or who have been there before but haven't been since, it's actually been redone and quite substantially. Right now, you can submit stories very easily with a submission form. It's very easy and quick to fill out. And, of course, the site now works very well on mobile devices. So if, a lot of people I noticed check out our YouTube channel on their phone, you can just go right from there to our website. It'll all work on your phone perfectly. And so if you like to read stories and pictures, I know you can't read a picture, but if you like to look at pictures and stuff like that, we have a whole host of things on that site that, of course, we can't cover in a podcast. So that's just some extra entertainment for you guys. And, of course, if you have something to submit, head over to our page and, go to the submission form and send in your stuff. So with that said, to the topic of the hour, the Winchester House. So as I was saying, there are two sides to the story. One side speaks of a woman haunted by angry spirits who were killed by Winchester rifles, and the other side just states that none of this was true. It's basically all made up for the to make money with tourism and stuff like that. And that actually goes on to say that Mrs. Winchester was a Freemason, and that certain specifics in the mansion design was actually, and I quote this from the site, thetruthAboutTheWinchesterHouse.com, and I quote, "An intricate puzzle of coded messages implements to guide the adventurer on a treasure trail of discovery." So if you're into that side of it, certainly go to that website and check it out. But just for the point of reference, I'm not going with that side of the story because that's the only place I found those details, and I didn't find anything. I'm not saying it's not credible. I'm not saying it's not true or whatever. I'm just saying that it's no more credible than the other stories I've heard about the haunted aspect of the house. And of course, there are way, way, way many more stories to reinforce that idea. And of course, people's experiences after visiting the house, and it has a long history. So for this episode, we will be focusing on the side of the angry spirits, which is the most
not the and not the storyline for the Da Vinci Code.
no, not that story. So this is the most well-known story, and if you want to see the other, if you want the other story, the details that you can kind of compare them yourself and decide for yourself what you want to believe in, you can go to the website thetruthaboutthewinchesterhouse.com, no spaces, and read the article by Richard Allen Wagner. So with that having been said, let's start at the beginning here. So, what is the Winchester House and why is it haunted? Well, the story goes like this. There was a woman, Sarah Winchester. She was born in 1839, and she went on to marry William Winchester in 1862. Now, William Winchester was the heir to the Winchester Repeating Arms Company, and that was the company that developed the Winchester rifle, which was used by the Northern troops at the Civil War and was also known as the gun that won the West. So it was a very important weapon that they used. Anyway, this family had an unusual amount of bad fortune, or at least that was the thought of Sarah Winchester. They both had a daughter who died in infancy, and of course, William Winchester died of tuberculosis. And this bad fortune that had befallen Sarah Winchester caused her to go see a fortune teller. And the fortune teller told her, basically, the Winchester family had been cursed, and that they were haunted by these angry spirits of those who had been killed by the Winchester rifle in the war. So now, I just want to point out also that there are conflicting reports on this, on this part of what the medium told her as well. Some places say that the medium told Sarah that in order to satisfy the ghosts, she would have to build a house for them, and the house could never be completed. It was supposed to be continuously built upon to kind of appease the ghosts, to make them happy, or that she would die. And the other variation to the story is that, she had to continuously build this mansion as a maze so that the evil spirits couldn't find her and kill her. Now, I'm more of I'm a believer of the middle ground, and of course that's another take on the story in that, she basically continuously built a house to appease the good spirits, and that there were evil spirits among them, and those she hid from. So she hid it, basically slept in a different room of the house every night, and she built the house like a maze so that they couldn't find her. But we'll get into
this part with the medium, the psychic medium. Now, this guy was a famous psychic medium out of Boston. And I actually done some digging around to see what I could find on this guy. His name apparently was Adam Coons. Now, I found the spelling two different ways. Coons, Coons, and Coombs, Coombs, or something like that.
Okay.
Now, but that's about all you're going to find on him. There's very little information surviving about who this guy was, and the first thing I thought was, that's some pretty strange advice. I wonder if he's heavily invested in the construction industry. But there's so very little information on who this guy was, and it just seems, I dug around looking to see also if what kind. How sound of advice is that?
It's
I've never
bizarre.
seen anywhere else in history, where somebody's tried to protect themselves. Well, I guess that's not exactly true. There are some cases of structures being built specifically for spirits, but I mean it's such a extreme degree. I don't know if you've come across anything else about Mr. Coons.
No, I haven't, but I'll tell you, one of the interesting things about this, actually, of course, you got this medium, and yes, that's very strange advice that you don't expect to go to a medium. It's like, yeah, I kind of got some bad luck. Yeah, well, what you should do is build a house and make it a maze so that the ghost can't find you. I mean, it's pretty strange, right? But that having been said, Sarah Winchester herself, as we'll get into the story, is a very eccentric person. In fact, she had a seance room in the house that she. Well, I don't want to spoil that yet. I'm going to go through the story, but yeah, she was very eccentric, and I think, I'm not going to say she's a medium, but she definitely had interests into that kind of a world. I mean, you'd have to have some kind of faith or belief anyway to go see a medium and take it that seriously, but. I think she was much more open to it, or already had a belief system in place that was already beyond what a normal person, would have. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Well, was she certainly didn't abide by your typical Puritan, Christian ideals.
Let's
go and dabble in the occult. But yeah, let's dive into it here.
Yeah. Okay. So she goes to this medium and she gets this advice, right? And basically, the idea is that if she didn't do this stuff that the medium told her, she was afraid that she was going to die like her daughter and her husband. So after hearing all this advice from the medium, Sarah goes out and she buys a farmhouse. It's like 162 acres of land in California. And this farmhouse, she built onto it for 38 years, all of which was done with the Winchester fortune that she got after her husband died, right? So now this mansion, for anyone who's not familiar with it, is really, really bizarre. I mean, it's one thing to say they built it like a maze, but it's more than that. They had stairs that go nowhere. Like you'd see a staircase. And it's still there. You can go see this stuff. The stairs go up and right to the ceiling, right? They have doors that when you open it, right behind the door is a wall, and a whole host of different bizarre things. So,
or a 20-foot drop.
Yeah, like you there's like a door that you open it, and it's to the outside. It's like floors down kind of a thing. You drop out of this thing, you're going to break your legs or break your neck.
This place is like, 7 stories high, right?
Oh yeah, I believe that was the final. Now I can't remember. I remember there was an earthquake and there was 2 or 3 floors that were damaged or had collapsed, but I can't remember if 7 stories was the remaining number or the number before that had happened. So anyway, I mean, this house is totally bizarre, and we'll get into more specifics for that. So I guess one of the interesting things to point out is that Sarah kind of acted as the architect for the house. But some say that the ghosts themselves would actually tell her how they wanted the house built. So I guess it depends on whether you believe that she built the house to please the spirits, or if she was kind of bullied into it by the ghosts. But going with the idea that she built the house to satisfy the good spirits, that she was kind of trying to, I don't know, maybe she felt like she owed them that much. They were because of her family history that she's tied into now. They created this rifle, killed him, blah blah blah. So maybe she felt like she owed these ghosts something, and this was her way of giving back. So
I also read accounts that Coons also told her that by doing this, that she would eventually achieve a state of immortality.
I've heard that too, which is an interest. Yeah, as long as she continuously built on the house, she wouldn't die, right? I mean,
evade death itself, I suppose.
It's well, obviously, it wasn't true. She's dead now. But again, it's a bizarre thing to be.
It certainly provides a powerful motivation.
Oh, certainly. Well, hell, if I thought I could live forever just building onto things, I become a carpenter tomorrow. But in any case, she went into she basically had the seance room, okay, like somewhere in the house, and every night she would go into this seance room, and she would apparently have these seances with these ghosts, and
Well, and it wasn't even at any old time, because she had specific bells that were set to ring, I believe, at midnight, and then all the servants would scurry away, and she would enter the chamber, and then at one it would summon the spirits, and then at two it would banish the spirits, and she would go back on her way. So there was quite a bit of ceremony, even around the times at which she would perform this. But
and of
please.
course, that's kind of what I was hoping we touch on, just the fact that, again, Sarah Winchester was not. It's not. I'm not saying she's abnormal, but it's eccentric. That's not like you or I. I mean, we're big paranormal fans and stuff like that, but we don't have a seance room where we go in and do this. I mean, you got to be pretty. You got to have some kind of faith or belief in this stuff to.
Well, it borders on almost a religious practice.
Exactly, right? So she, like, whether or not like any of this ended up being true, I mean, she certainly had a very strong belief that she was communicating with these spirits and this is what they wanted, or whatever. So when she went into these seances, the ghosts would tell her, I don't know if it was like a communication, like, okay, well, here's what I'm thinking, what do you guys think, or if it was just the ghost said, do this, do this, do this, and she would sketch all this stuff out on paper, and the next day she would go out to the construction workers with these sketches and say, build this, right? So, she not only was it strange things often that she have built, but she could send her construction workers in there, build this room that, extravagant room. I mean, she had very expensive tastes, and she had, I mean, these things were really done up, right? I mean, only the richest kind of people could afford it. And I mean, they could spend a couple weeks making this really extravagant, luxurious room, only to be told as soon as it's done, okay, go in, scrap it. Like, I mean, there's parts that these guys have built that they've, destroyed and had to rebuild different things, like time and time again. It's almost like there was like a whole 24 hours all the time for like these 38 years that this house was continuously being built and modified and changed. Which again kind of reinforces the idea that she wanted this place to be a maze, and she didn't want she didn't want, I guess, spirits to be able to recognize the layout. Maybe it was.
Well, yeah, the conventional wisdom is that she was trying to confuse the spirits. I found the seance room to be a very interesting aspect of the whole mansion and the house and the scenario all together. And I really dug around to see if I could find any examples of any other people being around there. And apparently there's this one story I came across of a servant who claimed to have seen Miss Winchester of summoning a spirit in the seance room, and it appeared and manifested as a disembodied hand holding a goblet, and Miss Winchester stepped forward and took and drank from the goblet that was being held aloft by a disembodied hand. And once, when she drank from the goblet, the servant screamed, and of course, Miss Winchester had her fired and removed from the property upon discovering her in the seance room. But I guess it's the only example I could find of you mentioned you weren't sure how the spirits communicated with her, whether it was a voice or whatnot. But that was the only example I could find of any documented interaction between her and the spirits. So it paints a bit of a different picture. As obviously in that instance she wasn't being given a piece of parchment with architectural drawings. It almost is reminiscent of witches and alchemists and potions. It
Well,
adds an element of strangeness to it. And apparently, the voices of people other than herself, along with that of a crying infant, were heard coming from the room.
well, one of the interesting things actually, she supposedly had thrown luxurious parties for the ghosts, just the ghosts, where she would serve them on gold plates, and like it would have like truffles and caviar, really expensive stuff. So it would almost seem like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if you would say, okay, she's terrified of these spirits and she's doing everything she can to keep them happy, or if she, actually enjoyed the company of the spirits. And again, keeping in mind that it's been noted throughout everywhere I checked that there's a distinction between that there were good spirits and there were evil spirits, right? There was two of them, and she was only trying to keep away from the evil spirits.
She was trying to appease the good spirits and hide from the bad spirits.
Exactly. So, I mean, one of the things to note, I guess, and and this is from the official site, WinchesterMysteryHouse.com. It has a lot of the pictures and a whole lot of detail. Actually, I was very surprised by how much detail they had on the official site. And some of the interesting things that I mentioned, one of it was the earthquake that I mentioned earlier. Sarah took that to be a sign that the house was almost completed and that the spirits were they were really angry. And so she actually went and sealed off a bunch of unfinished rooms to indicate that the rooms would never be finished, always in a stasis of incompleteness. Therefore, the house couldn't be finished, and the spirits would have to leave her alone. And on that same note, it said that apparently spirits hate mirrors. And so despite having over, I believe there's an estimate that there's like 160 rooms in the house, keeping in mind that nobody could ever get an exact count because they'd always get lost before they could ever, finish it. But despite having like 160 odd rooms, there were only ever apparently 3 mirrors in that whole place. I mean, most people have more than 3 mirrors in their place, right? So I think that again was a sign of respect towards the spirits. Like, I guess she wanted a mirror for herself, but it's very, very minimal to keep the spirits happy.
And a lot of lighting in the place, gas lighting, electric lighting, and I mean at a time when that was just that was almost supernatural magic, electric light bulbs.
Oh yeah, certainly, right. And I mean it's just.
And again, that plays into a more ghost lore where spirits don't necessarily like the shadows and the darkness because they can't themselves cast a shadow. So they, it's like the spirit sees itself in the mirror and it banishes it. So they don't like mirrors. They don't like shadows because it reminds them that they're dead, and they're jealous of that.
What's interesting is that there was actually a story, and this came off of their official site. Keeping in mind, these are from real people who visit. They visit the place, and there's a comment section. So I guess if you had been a tourist and you had some kind of experience, you're kind of invited to share that experience. And there is a lot there, but I remember one of them had to do with mirrors. And what it was this guy and his dad or something like that. He had, he happened, like they were with the tourists and they kind of slipped off a little bit away from them, and they found one of the mirrors. And they both noticed that none of the, the tourist people that were all in the background around them were casting a reflection in a mirror. which was, that's bizarre, right? I mean,
That's extremely bizarre.
yeah. So I mean, just to go on again, that like, yeah, a lot of regular people, took the time to write in these things, and you can discount stuff. It's easy to discount stuff, but I was kind of surprised by the wealth of it, I guess, right? Because there's this whole belief that, it's a tourist attraction, so it all must be, it's all for attracting tourists, And I don't know. I mean, there's probably some truth to that too, but I'm just saying that there's so many, submissions from, people who've had these encounters, that I find it hard to believe that it's all hokey or hokum.
And in thinking about what the Winchester House represents, I mean, the internal structure, and for anybody who hasn't seen the house, there are some beautiful photographs on the official website, the winchestermysteryhouse.com, and one of the most striking things is all of the different types of geometry, the patterns, and if you think about it, it's almost like a reminiscent of a three-dimensional, hyper complex crop circle in a way. You get those stories of people who are out, faking a crop circle, and then all of a sudden weird lights start appearing, and they're like building a crop circle just for fun. Because some people, it's like a form of art, I suppose, expression. People do it.
It almost sounds like, whether you're intending it or not, it actually starts up some kind of communication. I mean,
well,
yeah.
some type of communication. Some people figure that it's some type of, perhaps some kind of geoglyph, a magic where you're harnessing the energy of the planet, and you're using geometrical forms and shapes. Just the idea of taking, living things like grasses or wheat, and pressing them into specific patterns. You're actually creating electrical pathways. But if it is more about the actual lines and geometry and the shapes, perhaps that played a aspect into it. Maybe there were no ghosts until she built the house, and the bizarre geometry of the place itself gave rise to anomalous activity.
Well, I'll tell you this. One of the interesting things to note, I mean, for anyone who's familiar with numerology, the idea that certain numbers mean certain things and stuff like that. For example, the number 13 is considered by many people to be unlucky. Friday the 13th. So it's interesting to note that Sarah had some kind of fixation with that number. She used it, for example, in there would be 13 sections of flooring, or 13 stairs in each staircase, 13 bathrooms, 13 drain holes, and this expanded even out into this amazing garden that she had, and even beyond that, there were just totally bizarre. I mean, she had stair posts that were built upside down. There were cabinets with less of an inch of depth. So you can imagine, I mean, it's like a cabinet. You open it up, and there's not enough room to put anything in it. She had these beautiful artistic windows, I guess, painted glass, kind of maybe reminiscent of a church window. And she would have these wooden panels put behind it, so that the light actually didn't shine through them. It defeats the whole purpose of what these are for. So I mean, we're talking a lot of money invested and time, because I mean this went on for 38 years.
Yeah.
So was Sarah Winchester haunted, or was this all in her head? Did she have some kind of a mental issue or something like that? It's just really bizarre behavior. In fact, I mean, just to kind of establish some more on how eccentric she was, I mean, she had basically spy devices set up all throughout her house so that she could see what her servants were up to all the time, right? I mean, she could keep an eye on all of her servants. One of the other things I remember reading, when she was hiring gardeners, there were, she had 3 different gardeners apply for this job, and I believe it was cabbages, and she said, to the first one, she said, I want these cabbages planted upside down. And the first guy did it, he didn't question, and the second guy, starting to sound like a joke. The second guy comes in and he's like, he refuses to do it because it is ridiculous, right? The third guy comes and applies for the job, and he's like, you know what? I'll do it, but, and explains to her why, she shouldn't do it, what the problem is with it. And that's the guy that got the job because she was testing all of them. And the third guy, he was willing to do what he was told, which means he's a good worker, but he'd also, he's not afraid to speak up and tell her if there was something wrong with it. And so that's the kind of eccentric person that she was, right? I mean, she would test her employees. Like, she'd have some guy paint this room, top to bottom, like a lot of work, and then right after that, get him to paint it a different color, right? Just to see if he'd say anything, if he'd squawk, if he'd, So she was very strict. She knew what she wanted, and she would test her servants, and she had eyes on them all the time. So again, a very eccentric person. And she also had apparently an amazing memory. Like people said, people who worked for her and stuff like that said that she was able to recall basically every little thing in that giant. I mean, this is a big mansion, right? I can't even remember what's in my house, okay? Let alone a mansion with like 160 rooms and everything's different. But just to give you an idea of her, her ability to recall things, this one repair guy comes this day, right? 'Cause she had like a lot of supplies put into a storeroom, so that people could. Yeah, I guess the construction workers always had materials to draw on when they wanted to build something, and she had these 6 specific screws. Apparently they were gold plated or something like that. And anyway, this construction worker or repair guy, whatever, he goes in there, he takes these 6 screws and uses them. And Sarah hunts him down, freaking out, and says, did you take those 6 screws? And he was like, yeah. And she said, I was saving those screws for something in particular. These are gold plated. I want you to use something cheaper. So, I mean, she knew everything right down to, 6 insignificant screws in a giant storeroom full of materials.
Almost an eidetic memory, one would suppose.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like I said. It's really bizarre. I mean, she almost, to me. She almost seems, to a certain extent, what's the word? Like she had ESP, like extrasensory perception. Because I'll give you another example. Her nephew was coming to visit, and he was from away, right? And she knew apparently what his intentions were before he ever even got off the train, because when he arrived at the door. A maid greeted him, and she had a silver tray, and once she lifted the top, what was inside of it was a check for him. He was never even, to set foot in the house. She knew he came for money, and, she never communicated that he was, I don't even believe she knew he was coming, and she just knew that he was coming, he wanted money, that's all he wanted, and right at the door, it was like, here's your money, now go away, right? You're not even welcome inside. So she was an eccentric, paranoid too, because like I said, she kept her eyes on her servants all the time, possibly haunted. I mean, if anyone was haunted. She sounds haunted or completely crazy.
Well, I mean, depending on your stance on things, of course, in the course of researching the Winchester House, of course, I've came across several different points of view on the whole thing, and of course, you look at different belief systems, and I've seen one gentleman talking about how in the Bible it says that the spirits of the dead do not interact with this world. Once you die, that's it. You never interact with this world. So if a medium is getting information from a supernatural force, it's not from the spirit of another person. It's from some other creature that is not of God. So that for people of a strong Christian belief, I suppose that it would have to be demonic forces of some form or another that were, I don't know, compelling her. Why they would require a enormous opulent house, I have no idea. But the pervading wisdom of this guy that I was listening to anyway, was that it wasn't a spirit, or the information she received came from evil demons, basically. And the ceremonies and rites that she performed were satanic in nature. So I guess there's a darker take that one can have on the Winchester House. And I guess it really depends on your own personal belief system.
Oh, certainly. And one of the really interesting things that I kind of think of. I mean, when you think of the Winchester House, I mean it's a truly bizarre place. I mean, the whole thing, I mean, is made of like, I mean, when you go into a house or something like that, I mean, it usually has some kind of familiar layout. Like, where even if you've never been in the house before, you kind of get the sense of where the layout's going to be, and like the rooms, like everything kind of shares the similar traits. Whereas you go into this like giant mansion, and the whole thing is like a collage of different things, right? And I mean, some stuff is like purposely truly bizarre, like how we mentioned, like doors opening up to the outside and stairs that go nowhere and stuff like that. And then you take Sarah Winchester herself, who she's terrified, evil spirits are after her, yet she throws these luxurious parties and stuff like that for spirits. She has a seance room. I mean, she definitely believes in mediums and like ritualistic practices and stuff like that. And to me, the house itself is almost a truly accurate reflection of Sarah. It's like she had the house to be built as bizarre as she was. Which is such a strange, such a strange connection, when you want to look at it that way. Some other noteworthy snippets on that house is that, like, obviously they had money, right? I mean, she wouldn't have been able to continue building this house if it wasn't for the fact that she had this fortune from her husband when he died. So they had this safe in the house, right? And so obviously everybody was kind of excited, to see what kind of fortune was going to be in this thing, because, and anyway, they get the safe open. I mean, this is after she died and stuff like that. And instead of there being valuables inside, like money and jewelry and stuff like that, it had old belongings of her husband and daughter, in the form of like, fishing lines, socks and underwear, newspaper clippings, and a lock of baby's hair in a tiny purple clip. So again, like that, actually when I read that, it kind of reminded me of the Dybbuk box.
Yeah, no doubt.
Like it had these strange little, things in there that are more personal, and like anyone who's looked at rituals and stuff. And again, I'm not
saying it's a very common thing for any kind of
Yeah, because
ritual magic is to have personal possessions belonging. If you want to contact the spirit of somebody, you would, having a lock of their hair or personal possessions that
it
they
almost
used all the time.
yeah, it almost makes me wonder if she didn't actually communicate with her family that had passed on, like, in some weird way she probably still had her family with her in the house. Like, I'm sure the thought must have crossed her mind. She must have tried it. And some other kind of neat things is that, just to reinforce just how, into this belief system she was. They had this wine cellar in the house, right? Very expensive. Again, like really, really well done up wine cellar. And apparently Sarah had come across this black handprint on a wall. And she attributed this to like a dark omen. And she had the whole cellar boarded up, just over a black handprint. So, I mean, she was convinced that, this was some sign of something negative. There was something bad down here. And so just like that, forget the wine cellar, forget all the stuff I may or may not have in it. I don't ever want to be able to go in there or whatever's in there to get out. So some of the I mean, let's move on to some of the things that people have experienced at this Winchester House. So one of the things I came across, and of course this was from visitors, they've left these comments and stuff like that on the page. One of them heard, people have heard doors banging, phantom footsteps, and doorknobs turning with like nobody on the other side of the door, strange lights and cold spots. But one of the more interesting things I found was that paranormal investigators had gone to investigate the house, and they actually temporarily lost their eyesight. I mean, how messed up is that, right?
Yeah, that's a pretty significant thing to have happen.
Yeah, like I mean, I mean, I like kind of digging around with this stuff myself, but if I knew there was a chance I might lose my eyesight or something like that, I'm not sure how excited I'd be or how willing I'd be to, I mean, granted, I mean, you can always be worried that you're going to get possessed, which is probably worse. I don't know why I don't think of that stuff, but I just found that kind of bizarre.
Yeah.
And then there was a psychic research group called the Nirvana Foundation that visited the house, and they picked up the sound of an organ being played, and the whole group saw moving lights. Now, of course, Sarah Winchester apparently was known for playing the organ, and she did have one in the house, but I guess if they noted it, then they must have had reason to believe that she wasn't anywhere near it or whatever. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Another bizarre tale that I heard from the house was that in 1975, a psychic researcher by the name of Jean Borgen conducted a midnight seance in the bedroom where Sarah Winchester had died. And the people that were part of the seance said that Mrs. Borgen's face, like during the seance, had aged. Her hair went gray. Maybe her name is Jean. I think I read that wrong. Jean Borgen, it must be. Anyway, her face had aged. Her hair went gray, and she got wrinkles and deep lines creased across her forehead. She was in immense pain, and she was unable to walk. They said that it was as if she was acting as if she was having a heart attack, despite the fact that, her aging effect and stuff like that. And she started to fall, and she shouted out, "Help me, someone get me out of here." And she must have passed out or something like that, because the story picks up with saying that Jean woke up a short time later, and her breathing was back to normal. She had no pain. It was like as soon as she got out of that house too, because I noticed other stories where people who had noticed, people who had arthritis and tendonitis and stuff like that, and I mean, people get flare-ups, right? I mean, that's just a normal thing that happens to people with these issues. But they'd go into this house, on a tour, and it would just like get right out of control. All of a sudden, they'd be in racks of pain, and as soon as they'd come out of the house, all the pain would go away, right? And I thought that was pretty interesting, because it's not a case of one person saying that. That's a case of several people who have had the same thing happen. Same with people getting nauseous. Several people who have gone into the seance room in particular have gotten very, very nauseous, and as soon as they left, back to normal, right?
One has to wonder if they've even found all the hidden chambers.
Yeah, well, I don't even think that they did, right? Because, like I said, people who even tried to count the rooms would never be able to get through, because they'd lose count, because it was such a maze of a place. And I mean, that's not even counting how many places were boarded up, and that's just the ones that we know that were written about. And how many places do you think have been built over, like walls sealed up complete rooms or sections of the house, or basements, or
Cellars, yeah.
God only knows what could be down there. I mean, who knows? Maybe she did sacrificial rituals down there. Now, of course, that's complete speculation. I got nothing. I got nothing to say that anything like that ever occurred. I'm just saying that you got a house where you're boarding everything up. You got a person doing rituals. It's possible. So a couple of the other things I think, a couple of other stories I read was that people have claimed to have seen Sarah lying on her bed crying. And, when she was asked what was wrong, she said, get out, the spirits will get you, kind of a thing. And there was, again, with the nauseousness, a lot of people were overheated, and they noticed doors slamming shut, and supposedly a lot of people heard Sarah Winchester talk to them. There was one story I heard where there was I can't remember if this was a person or if it was a servant, but she had went in some kind of hallway or something like that, and all of the doors, every exit, which of course there were numerous, all the doors slammed shut at the same time and locked her in there, and she just started freaking out until either the doors let up or someone let her out or something like that. So I mean, yeah, this is really bizarre. I don't know how much. I realize, like, there's a stigma, I think, because it's a tourist place. There's this stigma that, oh yeah, it's all for tourism, is all to kind of attract people to the place. But I mean, this place was noted for being strange long before it was ever a tourist attraction, before Sarah Winchester died. I mean, way back in the 1800s. Harry Houdini even went there to do a seance. Although I couldn't find any of the details on it. It was like it was lost. But many known people had shown up to do seances or stuff like that way back before it was ever in a tourist attraction. Is it possible that the people who took over and turned it into an attraction embellished things? Well, certainly it's possible. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised, but I don't think that means that it was a perfectly natural house. I mean, no matter how you want to look at it, the house is completely bizarre, right? And I know that a strange architecturally designed building doesn't necessarily mean it's paranormal, but certainly, Sarah Winchester had a lot of faith.
Well, the whole circumstances surrounding everything just,
yeah,
they seem to speak something other than the natural world.
Yeah, and like I said, like the again, like even looking at numerology, right? Like 13 coat racks in the seance room and stuff like that. I mean, 13 of this and 13 of that. I mean, she was just. Those are things that harken back to, they kind of reference that kind of world. I mean, it'd be one thing if you had one example of it. Maybe it's this person's favorite number, but there was just too many symbolic things in that house that lends itself to a ritual world or someone who believes in these kinds of things, right? I mean, and the whole story again goes back to the fact that she spoke to a medium, and I really don't believe that this was her first time speaking to a medium or having any belief in something strange, because it seemed like her whole life was built on, I mean, this is someone who was educated and experienced with ritualistic practices and stuff like that, right?
Deeply steeped in well, at the very least, superstition and perhaps at the deeper levels, mysticism and ritual magic.
Yeah. So I mean, that's what this house is. This house is it's a very complex and strange reflection of a very complex and strange person, which all seems to stem from a very strange and complex string of events. So, if personally, I would love to go and visit that place. In fact, if I ever get a chance to, I'm going to. But with that said, I think that about covers our story on the Winchester House. So those of you listening, if you've been to the Winchester House, if you know someone who has a strange experience to share, I'd certainly love to hear it. You can email me or Ryan, or of course, simply go to our official website at effedupstories.com, effedupstories.com, and fill out a submission form and tell us what you saw, what you heard, that kind of a thing. And of course, any kind of paranormal story that you may have, or picture or video or whatever, if you have it, send it to us. It'll likely be put on our site, and possibly you could get yourself on one of our podcasts as a guest. So if that's all I have to say, unless you have something to add, Ryan.
Well, just be sure to, if you like our stuff, like it, subscribe, leave a comment, and please join our Facebook. Any questions, comments, or concerns, either email us or, contact me through I operate the Facebook site, so you can contact me through there. And other than that, thank you very much for listening.
And I forgot, actually. I'm on Twitter, too, so you can add me there. So with that said, thank you guys for listening, and have a good night.
Good night.